An incredible discovery has left archaeologists stunned. It was found near the coast of Peru.
The ground beneath Sacsayhuamán is hollow, and the government does not want anyone going inside. In 1923, explorers entered a hole in the rocks and never came back, leading to a massive cover-up that still exists today.
We're looking at a two-phase construction site in many of the so-called Inca stone monuments.
This deep dive uncovers the truth about the Chincana Grande labyrinth, the 200-ton monolith that was abandoned mid-journey, and the strange acoustic echoes that make the stones sound like they are breathing. Forget what the history books say about simple hammers and chisels. The engineering found in the deep foundations proves a technology far beyond what we are told existed. Underground blueprint. Sacsayhuamán is often called a fortress, but that is basically a huge understatement. For decades, everyone thought the massive zigzagging walls were the main event. But here's the catch. Recent dig sites and advanced ground-penetrating radar are now showing that these walls actually extend deep below the surface with the same level of precision, engineering, and massive size as what we see on top. This is huge because it suggests we are looking at a two-phase construction site. The part we see is incredible, but the part beneath the ground is where things get really weird. Experts are starting to wonder if the entire site is less like a building and more like a giant lid. What if Sacsayhuamán isn't just a fortress, but the top of something buried, sealed, and intentionally forgotten? Beneath those massive stones lies more than just a bit of history. We are talking about tunnels that no one is allowed to enter. These tunnels are not just small crawl spaces either. They extend far out into the Andes, connecting various complexes and sites together in a web that stretches for miles. The crazy part is that the mysteries of this site go much deeper than just the surface rocks. There are reports of magnetic fields that scramble compasses and rumors of chambers that stretch for miles and swallow people whole. Who actually built what is beneath the ground? And why is it still off-limits to the public today? For starters, local legends whispered about a world beneath the stones long before any modern scientist brought radar equipment to the site. They talked about hidden chambers, endless tunnels, and doorways that led to secrets the surface wasn't meant to reveal. When international researchers finally collaborated with Peruvian authorities to use radar in the early 2010s, those whispers started to sound like the truth. The researchers were looking for the foundations of circular structures, but they found anomalies instead. They saw deep voids, angled chambers, and what appeared to be carved tunnels stretching both downward and outward from the main plateau. In particular, beneath the Muyuk Marca Tower, a central circular foundation has baffled historians for a long time. Radar imaging revealed what looked like hollowed corridors cut through solid bedrock. Some of these corridors drop several yards in sharply linear patterns that simply do not occur in nature. This was hands down no accident of geology. The substructures appeared not only to be artificially created, but intentionally hidden from view. Basically, someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure these areas stayed underground. It's not that simple, though, because some of the entrances were once open. Everything we see on the surface is just a small part of a much larger plan. Forbidden labyrinths. Several of the known entrances to these underground features were officially sealed off by the government in the early 20th century. The most famous one is near the Chincana Grande, which means the Great Labyrinth. And get this, the reason they sealed it is terrifying. According to the Cusco archives, multiple young explorers had entered the tunnels over the years, and some of them never returned. One chilling case in 1923 involved a teenager whose disappearance prompted mass panic. The only thing found afterward was a partially collapsed interior wall and scorch marks inside a sealed cavity. No official explanation was ever given. But the rumors are wild. Some people think the tunnels are so complex that it is impossible to find your way out once you lose your light. But the most startling fact is the scale of the map. Some of these tunnels are said to run all the way from Sacsayhuamán to Coricancha, which was the former Temple of the Sun in central Cusco. That is a distance of over 1¼ miles. Think about that for a second. That isn't just a bit of digging. That is precision subterranean planning on a massive scale. Some believe the Incas merely reused much older structures built by a lost civilization that had tools we can't even imagine. Others point to similarities with the under-temple vaults of Egypt, or even megalithic sites like Tiwanaku in Bolivia. Could these tunnels have served as emergency escape routes for priests or royalty? Were they paths for smuggling sacred artifacts during the Spanish conquest? Or were they part of something much deeper and more cosmological? To this day, radar studies in the Muyuk Marca zone remain incomplete. The weirdest part is that the work is often disrupted by unexplained electromagnetic interference. Signals drop and equipment malfunctions for no reason. One theory says the area holds a natural magnetic anomaly, but others think there is buried metallic tech down there once powered by Earth energy. It's almost extraterrestrial in a sense. Whatever the truth is, the real story of this mountain may still be buried literally beneath our feet. We are talking about thousands of tons of rock moved with a level of skill that makes modern engineers scratch their heads. It's like we are looking at the work of two different groups. One group built the surface walls, but someone else might have carved the bedrock foundations. And that's putting it lightly, because the scale of the work is just too big for the tools we are told they had. The deeper they dig, the more the history books start to look like fiction. Abandoned megaliths. Just a short walk from the main complex lies an object so massive it seems totally out of place. Locals call it the Tired Stone. This giant block is nearly 30 feet long and weighs over 200 tons. It sits tilted against a slope, appearing as though it simply gave up during a long journey. Legend says thousands of laborers were moving this stone from a quarry miles away when it slipped and rolled. It supposedly crushed an entire procession of workers, and after that disaster, the stone was called cursed. But there is a much deeper mystery behind the Tired Stone. Behind it lies what appears to be an ancient cutout in the earth, partly buried by landslides and grass. In the early 20th century, explorers claimed this hole was once a formal entrance that led directly into a vast tunnel system. Spanish chronicles from the 16th century even refer to a grand underground path from this exact point. They said it led to hidden vaults filled with golden statues. These stories only fueled speculation that the stone did not stop randomly. People think it was placed there specifically to seal something more important. In 1989, a team of local and German researchers tried to dig around the stone. They discovered a man-made cavity nearly 13 feet deep. It had tool marks on the inner walls and what looked like the start of a stairway. However, just days into the dig, the project was abruptly halted. The official reason was safety concerns about the hillside being unstable. But unofficially, rumors spread that the researchers had found something they weren't supposed to see. They supposedly uncovered inscriptions and symbols that were not in the local language or Spanish. They were something much older. No photographs were ever released, which just added more fuel to the fire. Later, in 1996, an infrared aerial scan showed unnatural heat patterns beneath the stone. This suggests there is a hollow chamber right under it. Despite all this evidence, no modern project has been approved to go back and check. Why is there so much hesitation? Some say the government fears damaging a sacred site, but others believe it's about control. They want to keep what lies beneath sealed off from the public forever. It is like the work was just dropped halfway through, as if a cataclysm or a massive social collapse happened overnight. The massive stone wasn't just left behind. It was hiding the way down. Bedrock engineering. What makes the underground mystery even more unsettling is what engineers noticed when erosion exposed the lowest layers of the walls. These are not simple foundations like we use today. Beneath the visible zigzag stones lies a buried tier of construction that appears older and more massive. In several sections, the lower stones are actually larger than the ones on top of them. They are deeply anchored into the bedrock and laid out in a pattern that does not match classic Inca masonry. This violates a basic rule of architecture. Usually, you build a solid base and then get more refined as you go up. But here, it seems the bottom layer is the most complex. It speaks to a monumental effort and a genius level of engineering. Geologists have noted that some of these lower stones appear to be cut directly into the living rock. It is as if the builders were shaping the mountain itself rather than just stacking blocks on top of it. The tool marks found on these buried stones are different too. They are broader and deeper and lack the rhythmic hammering patterns we see on the surface. This just can't be done with copper chisels and stone hammers. It's not that simple, though. Even more puzzling is that some foundation stones appear to have been placed before the hill was even fully formed. This suggests the terrain was reshaped after the construction started. This has led to a controversial theory. People think the Incas inherited an ancient core structure and just built on top of it. They were basically reinforcing and repurposing something that was already there. We see this same pattern at other sites like Ollantaytambo and Pumapunku. You have highly refined masonry sitting right on top of giant, deeply embedded megaliths that no one can date precisely. In many cases, there is no organic material to test, so these layers are effectively time-locked. Adding to the mystery, the drainage channels in these buried levels are way more advanced than what you would need for just rainwater. Some of these channels slope inward, directing water deep underground instead of away from the walls. Engineers think they might have been designed to regulate pressure or prevent the ground from turning into liquid during an earthquake. Why would someone put that much work into something meant to stay hidden? The walls are not just standing on the mountain, they are part of it. Breathing stones. There is one more layer to this mystery, and it's not underground. It's in the very air around the stones. Visitors and researchers have reported an unusual acoustic phenomenon when standing between the zigzag walls. Certain sounds like claps or chants don't fade away like they should. Instead, they bounce in strange patterns and echo as if the walls were amplifying the sound. In 2005, a university team found that certain frequencies reverberated significantly stronger between the walls. It was almost as if the entire structure had been tuned like a musical instrument. Even more bizarre are the local stories about the breathing stones. During certain seasons, people claim to hear soft, rhythmic pulses coming from the base of specific stones. It sounds like a deep exhale of air. These are not just ghost stories. As recently as 2018, an expedition recorded low-frequency vibrations that fluctuated in a slow, wave-like rhythm. While some scientists say it's just wind, others think the stones are resonating because of the huge, hollow cavities beneath the hill. This has brought back theories that Sacsayhuamán is interacting with the Earth's natural energy. The deliberate choice of using different types of stone like limestone and andesite might be functional rather than just for looks. Could it be that these stones were arranged to harness seismic vibrations from the Earth? If you look at the composition of these rocks, particularly the andesite, you find a high concentration of quartz crystals. When quartz is put under immense pressure, like the weight of a 100-ton block, it produces a piezoelectric effect. This is a real physical phenomenon where mechanical stress is converted into an electrical charge. Some fringe theorists suggest the entire complex wasn't a fortress at all, but a massive ancient power plant. The constant shifting of the tectonic plates beneath the Andes could provide a perpetual source of squeezing for these stones, turning the zigzag walls into a giant, vibrating battery that hums at frequencies the human ear can barely perceive, but the human body can definitely feel. Ancient myths speak of stones that came alive when they were called upon. Is this just poetry, or is it a description of real physics? Some researchers believe these sites were aligned with Earth energy paths. If you add the solar alignments to the mix, it gets even more intense. The entire complex is mapped to the sky. In 2016, a study revealed that parts of the fortress align perfectly with the sun during the solstices and equinoxes. The zigzag walls might not just represent lightning. they might track the movement of the sun's shadow across the valley. When the shadows fall at certain angles on specific days, they point directly to hidden caves and water channels. This was likely a giant operational calendar for farming. But the most shocking part is that these solar alignments often lead directly to the bricked-up entrances of the underground tunnels. It is as if the builders were encoding time and space together. The stones on top mark the heavens, while the passages below track the earth. This brings us back to the big question. If all this was built thousands of years ago, are we missing a key detail about how advanced these people really were? The thing is, when you look at the magnetic spikes and the impossible carvings, it's hard to believe this was all done with simple hand tools. We are looking at a site that was built from the inside out, exactly like the local elders have always said. The precision is laser-like, and the joints are so perfect that the walls are essentially earthquake-proof. Every year, more evidence comes out showing that the massive structures we see are just the beginning. The real secrets are still waiting in the dark, miles beneath the surface. Consider the possibility that the stones were not carved, but molded. There is a wild but persistent theory that the ancient builders possessed a botanical secret, a liquid extracted from rare jungle plants that could soften stone into a putty-like consistency. This would explain how they were able to fit multi-angled blocks together with such intimacy that not even a razor blade can fit between them. If the stone was soft, they wouldn't need to haul and chip. They could simply pour and press. Some geologists have noted a vitrified or glass-like sheen on some of the rocks, suggesting they were subjected to intense heat or chemical reactions that altered their surface at a molecular level. If this technology existed, it changes everything we know about the Bronze Age. We aren't looking at a primitive society struggling with ropes and rollers, but a civilization that understood the alchemy of the earth itself. But why go to such lengths? If you can turn stone to liquid, why build walls 40 feet high? Some suggest the zigzag pattern is actually a giant antenna designed to interact with the ionosphere. The specific angles of the walls, often calculated to be around 104 degree or 108 degree, could be related to the golden ratio or specific mathematical constants that resonate with the Earth's Schumann resonance. This resonance, usually around 7.83 Hertz, is the heartbeat of our planet. If Sacsayhuamán was a resonator, it might have been used to synchronize the brainwaves of the people standing within it, inducing states of high consciousness or even mass hallucinations. Imagine 1,000 people chanting in the plaza, their voices hitting the frequency of the stones, creating a feedback loop of energy that could be seen as lightning or gods descending from the sky. There are even darker, more speculative theories. Some believe the tunnels don't just lead to gold or mummies, but to a different kind of inhabitant. Stories of the chincanas, the great labyrinths, often end with people disappearing forever. In the late 20th century, reports surfaced of explorers finding metallic walls deep underground that didn't match any known Incan style. These explorers claimed the air in these lower chambers felt electric and that their compasses spun wildly. This points to the idea that the fortress is actually a capstone for a much older, possibly non-human installation. If the Earth is hollowed out by massive volcanic tubes, it's not a stretch to think a previous civilization used them as a shield against a solar cataclysm. The walls we see today might just be the ventilation or communication towers for a city that lives miles below the crust. The magnetic anomalies found at the site in 2024 suggest that certain stones were transported from hundreds of miles away, not because they were easy to move, but because of their specific magnetic polarity. It's as if the builders were creating a giant circuit board on the side of the mountain. If you look at the site from a high-altitude drone, the layout of the walls doesn't look like a fort. It looks like a microprocessor. The water channels that run through the site might not have been for drinking, but for carrying an electrolyte-rich fluid that helped conduct energy across the limestone blocks. This would explain why the breathing sounds are more common after heavy rainfall. The water completes the circuit, and the machine wakes up. As we move into 2026, new LiDAR scans are revealing that the underground tunnels are far more extensive than previously mapped. They don't just go under the hill, they seem to connect Sacsayhuamán to the Coricancha temple in the heart of Cusco, and then stretch out towards the Sacred Valley. Some of these tunnels are wide enough for a modern truck to drive through, yet they are buried under hundreds of feet of solid rock. How were they ventilated? How were they lit? There are no soot marks from torches on the ceilings. This leads to the wildest theory of all, that the ancient builders had mastered cold light or bioluminescence. Or perhaps they didn't need light at all because they were navigating using the very acoustic frequencies we are now rediscovering. They lived in a world of sound and vibration, a world where stone was as fluid as water, and the earth was a living, breathing organism they could communicate with. The most terrifying thought is that the fortress isn't a relic of the past, but a dormant system waiting to be reactivated. If the solar alignments, the piezoelectric stones, and the acoustic chambers are all parts of a single machine, then we are like ants crawling over a supercomputer, wondering why the rows of bricks are so straight. The breathing sounds recorded in 2018 might not be the wind or the earth moving. It might be the sound of the machine's cooling system finally starting back up after 10,000 years of silence. As the sun aligns perfectly in the coming years, we might find out exactly what happens when the shadow of the puma touches the right stone at the right time. The bricked-up entrances might not be there to keep us out. They might be there to keep something else in. If these walls were built to seal something away, what could possibly be worth that much effort? Is it a lost library, an ancient energy source, or something we aren't ready to face? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this mystery, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Would you go into those tunnels?